The day I found my Aunt Sarah on the kitchen floor will stay with me forever. It was a cold autumn afternoon in Manchester, the kind where the rain taps relentlessly against the windows like it's trying to get in. I had let myself in with a spare key she'd given me years ago, calling out her name as I wiped my feet on the mat. No answer. The house felt unnaturally quiet. No radio humming in the background, no kettle whistling, just the faint smell of yesterday's tea lingering in the air. I found her there, on all fours, one hand clutching her lower back, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to scrub a stubborn stain from the tiles with a ragged cloth, her gray hair falling loose from its usual neat bun. Her sari, the one she'd worn since coming to England from India in the 70s, was hitched up slightly, revealing the exhaustion in every movement. "Auntie," I whispered, dropping my bag and rushing to her side. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed, and tried to smile through the pain. "Oh, love, it's nothing. Just a twinge. This floor, it's filthy. I can't leave it like this." But it wasn't nothing. At 68, Aunt Sarah had always been the strong one, the pillar of our family. She'd raised me and my sister almost as much as Mum had, especially after Dad left when I was 10. She'd worked double shifts at the textile factory for decades, sent money back home to her siblings in Gujarat, and still found time to cook massive Sunday curries that filled the house with spices and laughter. Widowed young when Uncle Raj died of a heart attack 15 years ago, she'd never complained. "Life goes on, beta," she'd say, patting my cheek with flour-dusted hands. That day, though, something had broken. Not just her back, though the doctor later confirmed it was a slipped disc from years of heavy lifting and bending. It was deeper than that. As I helped her to the sofa, wrapping her in a blanket and making her a cup of strong masala chai the way she liked it, extra cardamom, no sugar, she finally let the words tumble out. "The house feels too big now, Tom," she said quietly, staring into her cup. "Since your uncle went, it's just me rattling around in here. The garden's overgrown, the bills are piling up, and this body, it's not what it used to be. I can't even clean properly anymore. What kind of home is this if I can't keep it nice?" I sat beside her, my arm around her shoulders. At 28, I just started a decent job as a graphic designer in the city center, living in a tiny flat share with mates. Family was everything to us, extended lunches at hers every weekend, cousins popping in unannounced. But I'd been so wrapped up in my own life that I hadn't noticed how lonely she'd become. The strong, independent woman who'd taught me to tie my shoes and make perfect rotlies was struggling, and she'd hidden it behind her proud smile. That evening, as I helped her into bed and promised to sort a doctor's appointment, I made a silent vow. She had been there for me through every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every milestone. Now it was my turn. Little did I know then that helping Aunt Sarah would change both our lives in ways I could never have imagined. Over the next few weeks, I started coming round more often. I'd pop in after work to Hoover, do the shopping at the local Asda, or just sit and chat while she rested. But it quickly became clear that a few hours here and there weren't enough. Her pain wasn't easing, and the isolation was weighing on her. One night, over the phone, she admitted something that broke my heart. "Sometimes I think about selling the house and moving into one of those care places. But this is our home, where you kids grew up playing in the back garden." No way was that happening. Not if I could help it. The doctor's words were blunt. No more scrubbing floors, no heavy lifting, no standing for hours at the cooker. Rest, physiotherapy, and painkillers for now. Aunt Sarah nodded politely in the surgery, but the moment we stepped out into the drizzling December rain, she turned to me with fire in her eyes. "I'm not an invalid, Tom. I won't sit in a chair all day like some old woman waiting to die." I didn't argue. I knew that look, the same one she'd worn when she'd worked 12-hour shifts while nursing Uncle Raj through his illness, the same one when she'd single-handedly organized my sister's wedding on a shoestring. Pride ran deep in her. Admitting she needed help felt like defeat. Back home, I made us both a brew and sat her down. "Auntie, listen. You're not giving up anything. We're just rearranging things. Let me sort a few practical bits, yeah? No fuss." She grumbled, but she was too tired to fight. That night I lay awake in my flat, scrolling through my phone, trying to work out how to make this work long-term. I couldn't keep popping round every evening. My job was demanding, deadlines were tight, and the commute from town took nearly an hour on a good day. But moving in with her full-time wasn't realistic either. The house had 3 bedrooms, but I'd built my own life now. The idea came to me slowly, over the next few days. I started small. First, I booked her into the local NHS physio at Withington Community Hospital, twice a week, with a lovely therapist called Priya who spoke Gujarati and made Aunt Sarah laugh. Then I ordered one of those cordless vacuum cleaners that glide across the floor without bending, the kind advertised by that smiling woman on telly. When it arrived, I set it up and showed her how light it was. See? You can do the bits you want, but no crawling on your knees. She eyed it suspiciously, then gave it a cautious push. A small smile crept onto her face when she saw how easily it picked up the crumbs under the dining table. But the real turning point came one Saturday when my cousin Neha came over with her 2 little ones. The kids tore around the house as usual, leaving toys and crisp packets in their wake. Aunt Sarah watched from the sofa, wincing every time she tried to get up to tidy. By tea time she was quiet, almost withdrawn. Later, after Neha left, she said, "This house used to be full of noise, good noise. Now it's just me and the telly. I love seeing the kids, but then when they go, it's too empty." That hit me hard. It wasn't just about physical help. It was the loneliness that was wearing her down. I started staying over at weekends. I'd bring my laptop, work from the dining table while she pottered gently in the kitchen making small batches of food, things she could manage sitting down, like rolling out rotlis on a low stool I'd bought. We'd watch old Bollywood films together, arguing good-naturedly over whether Shah Rukh Khan or Salman Khan was better. Slowly, the house felt warmer again. One evening, as we shared a plate of her famous undiyu, made with half the effort but all the love, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're a good boy, Tom. Your mum and dad would be proud." I felt a lump in my throat. "We're not done yet, Auntie. There's more I want to do." She raised an eyebrow. "More? You're already doing too much." I shook my head. "Not enough. Not nearly enough." What I didn't tell her then was that I'd already started researching something bigger. Something that might give her back not just her home, but her purpose. I'd been talking quietly to Neha and my sister Priya, and even to a couple of Auntie's old friends from the Mundal. An idea was forming, one that would bring life back into those quiet rooms. But first, I needed to convince her it was possible. By early January, Aunt Sarah was moving a little easier. The physiotherapy was helping, and the new routines we'd built, light chores, short walks to the end of the street, resting when she needed, had taken the sharp edge off her pain. But the house still felt too quiet on weekdays. I could see it in the way she lingered over her morning chai, staring out at the bare winter garden, or how she'd turn the telly volume up just to have some company. I knew I had to act on the idea that had been growing in my mind. One Sunday afternoon, after a big family lunch, Neha, Priya, their husbands, and all the kids crammed around the extended dining table. I waited until everyone had gone home and the washing up was done. Aunt Sarah was dozing in her armchair by the gas fire, a woolen shawl around her shoulders. I made us both a fresh cuppa and sat on the footstool beside her. "Auntie," I said gently, "I've been thinking about something. Hear me out before you say no." She opened one eye, already suspicious. "What mischief are you planning now, Tom?" "No mischief. Just an idea to bring some life back into this house." I took a deep breath. What if we turned the downstairs spare bedroom into a little day center? Not a proper business or anything. Just a place where some of the older Gujarati aunties and uncles from the Mundal could come a couple of days a week. Tea, lunch, cards, budgeons, a bit of company. You'd be in charge, of course. They'd come to you. She sat up straighter, frowning. "A day center? In my house? With my back like this?" "Not heavy work," I said quickly. "We'd get a cleaner in once a week. There's that Polish lady down the road who does a good job for reasonable money. I'd sort the shopping and prep on my days off. Neha and Priya have already said they'll help with lifts and cooking when they can. And the community would chip in. You know how it works. One brings samosas, another brings the tea masala, someone else does the dishes. It wouldn't all fall on you." She was quiet for a long time, turning the idea over like dough in her hands. "I'm not a charity case, Beta," she said finally, voice soft but firm. "You're not," I replied. "You'd be giving something. These aunties, Mrs. Patel who lost her husband last year, Uncle Desai whose kids are in London, Auntie Meta with the arthritis, they're lonely too. They miss the old days when everyone lived round the corner and doors were always open. You'd be the heart of it. Like you always have been." Her eyes filled up, but she blinked it away. "And the cost? Gas, electric, food." "I've looked into it. There's a small grant from the council for community well-being projects in areas like ours. I filled in the forms last week. Just an expression of interest. And if we charge £1 or £2 per person for lunch, it'll cover itself. No one goes without if they can't pay." She looked around the room, at the faded photos on the mantelpiece of weddings and birthdays, at the sofa where Uncle Raj used to nap after work, at the kitchen where she'd fed generations of family and friends. "This house has always been open to people," she said slowly. "Your uncle would have liked the idea. He loved having the place full." I felt my chest tighten with hope. "So, is that a yes?" She reached out and patted my knee. "It's a maybe. Let me talk to a couple of the aunties first. See if they'd even come." That was all I needed. The next weekend, I drove her to the Mundell Hall after Sunday prayers. She sat in the corner with her closest friends, 3 widows in their late 60s and early 70s, and I watched from across the room as she explained the idea, hands moving animatedly despite the caution. Within minutes they were all talking at once, laughing, suggesting menus, arguing over who made the best thepla. By the time we left, she had 6 firm yes and a list of others to phone. On the drive home, she was quieter again, but it was a thoughtful quiet. "You know, Tom," she said as we pulled into the street, "I thought my useful days were over. But maybe there's still a little something left in these old bones." I smiled. "More than a little, Auntie. A lot." That night, I started clearing the spare room, moving out the old sewing machine and boxes of saris that hadn't been worn in years. We'd need space for a bigger table, some comfy chairs, perhaps a second-hand sofa from the British Heart Foundation shop. The seed had been planted. Now it was time to watch it grow. Spring arrived early that year, with crocuses pushing through the soggy lawn and the air carrying the faint promise of warmer days. By March, the spare room had been transformed. I'd painted the walls a soft cream, not hospital beige, Aunt Sarah insisted, and we'd picked up a sturdy second-hand dining table from Gumtree that could seat 10 comfortably. Neha donated some bright cushions, Priya brought framed photos of family weddings to hang on the walls, and one of the uncles from the Mundell surprised us with a brand-new electric kettle and a proper tea urn he'd happened to have spare. We called it Saraben's front room, nothing official, no signs on the door, just word of mouth. We settled on Tuesdays and Fridays, 11 till 3, with a simple vegetarian lunch included. The suggested donation was £3, but Aunt Sarah made it clear from the start, if you can't manage it, you still come. No one eats alone in my house. The first Tuesday, only 5 people turned up. Mrs. Patel with her walking stick, Uncle Desai carrying a Tupperware of common dakla, Auntie Meta and her sister, and old Mr. Shah who'd been a neighbor decades ago. I was nervous, hovering in the kitchen, ready to jump in if anything went wrong. I needn't have worried. Aunt Sarah, dressed in her favorite green sari, hair neatly pinned, greeted each one at the door like they were long-lost relatives. Within minutes the kettle was on, the table was laid with her best melamine plates, and the room filled with chatter in Gujarati. Laughter, gentle teasing, stories from the old days in India and the harder days when they'd first arrived in Manchester with nothing but suitcases and hope. I served the food, a simple menu that week of rice, dal, shak, rotli, and salad, mostly prepared the night before so Aunt Sarah only had to heat things through while sitting down. After lunch they played cards, then someone started a bhajan, voices soft at first, then stronger. I stood in the doorway watching my aunt in the center of it all, eyes shining, hands keeping time on the table. She looked 10 years younger. By the 3rd week, we were turning people away for lack of chairs. Word had spread fast. 15 regulars now, plus a few who came when they could. The donations more than covered ingredients and bills. We even had a little pot building up for outings. Aunt Sarah kept meticulous accounts in an old exercise book, refusing to let anyone feel it was charity. One Friday in April, after everyone had gone home and we were washing up together, Me at the sink, her drying from a stool, she said quietly. You know, Tom, I used to pray every morning that God would give me a reason to get out of bed. I stopped praying for a while. Thought he wasn't listening. I glanced at her, hands sudsy. Now, she went on, I wake up excited. Tuesdays and Fridays especially, but even the other days I'm planning menus or thinking who might need a phone call. This old house feels alive again. The walls are happy. I laughed, flicking a bit of soap foam at her. The walls are happy. Yes, she said seriously. Houses need people, Beta. Laughter, cooking smells, footsteps. Otherwise they just get sad and dusty. That evening, I drove back to my flat feeling lighter than I had in years. My own life, work, mates, the occasional date, was still there, but it had shifted. Weekends were now spent at Aunt Sarah's more often than not, and I didn't mind one bit. But the biggest change was yet to come. One of the regulars, Auntie Meta, mentioned casually one day that her daughter in Canada was worried about her living alone. She keeps saying I should move into one of those assisted places over there, she sighed. But I don't want to leave Manchester. All my memories are here. Aunt Sarah caught my eye across the table, and I could see the same thought forming in her mind. That night, over a late cup of Horlicks, she said it out loud. What if we made this more than just 2 days a week? What if some of them could stay longer? Or even overnight sometimes, if their families are away? I put my mug down slowly. Auntie, are you saying what I think you're saying? She nodded, a small, determined smile on her face. This house has 3 bedrooms upstairs going empty. Why not use them properly? The idea of turning the upstairs bedrooms into something more permanent hung in the air for weeks. Aunt Sarah didn't bring it up again straight away, but I could tell it was simmering. She'd pause on the landing when carrying laundry, glance at the closed doors of the 2 spare rooms, and sigh. Not a sad sigh, more like someone weighing a possibility they hadn't dared consider before. We carried on with Sarabin's front room through the summer. Tuesdays and Fridays were now the highlight of the week for 20 regulars, sometimes more. The garden got tidied by a couple of the uncles who missed pottering outdoors, and we even held a small Jamishtami celebration in August with budgeons that spilled out into the backyard. The house rang with voices again, and Aunt Sarah's back held up better than any of us expected. The joy seemed to work like medicine. One rainy September afternoon, after the last guest had been collected by their son, Aunt Sarah called me into the living room. She was sitting with a notebook on her lap, pages filled with her neat Gujarati handwriting. Sit down, Beta. We need to talk properly. I sat, heart thumping. This was it. I've been thinking about what I said, about the bedrooms. And I've spoken to a few people. She tapped the notebook. Mrs. Patel's daughter is moving to Birmingham for work and doesn't want her mum alone in that big flat. Uncle Desai's son is going abroad for 6 months next year. Auntie Meta's family keep pressing her to go to Canada, but she cries every time they mention it. She looked up at me, eyes steady. What if we offered them a room here? Not a care home, nothing like that. Just living together. Like a proper joint family again. They pay a fair amount for board and lodging, help where they can, keep each other company. I cook, we all eat together, watch telly, go to the Mundell. If someone needs a doctor, we sort it between us. I let out a long breath. You're talking about turning the house into a shared home for elders. She nodded. A Gujarati shared home. Our way. No uniforms, no set meal times, no strangers coming in and out. Just family, even if it's family we chose. There were 100 practical questions. Council regulations, insurance, benefits, health and safety. I spent the next month researching quietly. It turned out small shared houses for fewer than 6 people didn't need full registration as a care home if no personal care was provided. Just companionship and meals. We could manage that. I spoke to a solicitor friend of a friend who helped draft simple residency agreements. The community rallied. One uncle knew someone at the council, another offered to install grab rails in the bathroom, for safety, nothing more. By November, we were ready for a trial. Mrs. Patel moved in first. She brought her own bedding, a small shrine for the corner of her room, and a tin full of homemade chevdo that lasted us a week. 2 weeks later, Auntie Meta joined with her knitting bag and a stack of old recipe books. The house adjusted like it had been waiting for this all along. Meals became bigger affairs, 3 older ladies debating the perfect amount of chili in shock while I set the table. Evenings filled with laughter over Antakshari or quiet conversations about grandchildren on WhatsApp calls. Aunt Sarah blossomed. She still had bad days when her back ached, but there was always someone to make her a hot water bottle or take over stirring the dal. She wasn't carrying the house alone anymore. One evening in early December, I came over after work to find the 3 of them in the front room wrapping Christmas lights around a small artificial tree we'd bought from Wilco. Gujarati bhajans played softly on the radio while they argued good-naturedly about whether fairy lights should go on first or tinsel. Aunt Sarah spotted me in the doorway and beckoned me in. "Look at this, Tom. We're even doing Christmas now. Mrs. Patel says it's only fair since we did Diwali properly." I laughed as Auntie Meta handed me a cup of Adrak chai without asking. Later, when the others had gone up to bed, Aunt Sarah and I sat by the fire. "You know," she said softly, "when I was on that kitchen floor last year, I thought that was the beginning of the end. Giving up the house, moving somewhere small and gray. But you wouldn't let me." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "You gave me back my home. More than that, you gave me a family again. Not instead of the one I lost, but alongside it. This old house is fuller now than it's been since your uncle was alive." She reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Beta. And I'm happy. Truly happy." I swallowed hard. "I'm just glad I could help, Auntie." She smiled, eyes twinkling. "You did more than help. You reminded me that sometimes the best way to heal is to open the door wider." Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent against the window. Inside, the house was warm, full of light and voices and the smell of tomorrow's dinner already planned. A year had passed since that cold afternoon when I found Aunt Sarah on the kitchen floor. It was now December again, and the house on Maple Street in Manchester looked nothing like the quiet, echoing place it had once been. Snow dusted the front path, fairy lights twinkled in the window, and the smell of fresh ghee and cinnamon drifted out every time the door opened. Sarahben's house, the name the residents had chosen themselves, was home to 5 people now. Aunt Sarah, Mrs. Patel, Auntie Meta, Uncle Desai, and quiet Mr. Shah, who had moved in after a fall left him wary of living alone. The upstairs bedrooms were full, each personalized with photos, prayer corners, and knitted throws. The front room still hosted the Tuesday and Friday gatherings, but now there were always extra voices, extra footsteps, extra life. I arrived on Christmas Eve with my sister Priya, Neha, and all the kids in tow, arms laden with presents and supermarket bags. The residents had insisted on a proper Christmas dinner alongside their usual festive treats. Aunt Sarah had spent days preparing vegetable biryani and mohanthal, while Mrs. Patel had somehow mastered roast potatoes with jeera. The dining table had been extended with every leaf we owned, chairs borrowed from neighbors, and the kids squeezed onto a bench at the end. 23 of us in total, spanning 3 generations, laughing over paper crowns and bad jokes from the crackers. Uncle Desai told the story, for the 10th time, of his first English Christmas in 1974, when he'd mistaken mince pies for something savory and loaded them with chutney. The room roared. Later, when the children were playing with new toys in the front room and the washing up was being tackled by a cheerful assembly line, I found Aunt Sarah in the kitchen. She was sitting on her stool, the one I'd bought her all those months ago, watching the snow fall softly outside the window. I handed her a fresh cup of masala chai and sat beside her. "Happy?" I asked quietly. She turned to me, eyes bright. "Happier than I've been in years, Beta. Look at this." She gestured towards the doorway, where Auntie Meta was teaching my youngest niece a simple gabra step, both of them giggling as they spun in slow circles. "This is what a home should feel like. Full bellies, full hearts." I nodded, throat tight. "You did this, Auntie. All of it." She shook her head firmly. "No. We did it. You saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself. You wouldn't let me give up. And now look, 5 old people who thought their best days were behind them, living like family again. The council even sent someone round to see how we manage it. Said we should be an example for others." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the chatter from the next room. "I spoke to your mum on the phone this morning," she said eventually. "She cried. Said she wished she could be here to see it. Mum had moved to Leicester years ago to be near Priya, but she visited whenever she could. She'll be up for New Year's, I reminded her. Aunt Sarah smiled. Good. We'll need her help with the Diwali clearance sweets. As the evening wound down and families began bundling children into coats, hugs and goodbyes filled the hallway. Promises of visits, leftovers pressed into hands, invitations for New Year's Eve already flying. When the last guest left and the residents had gone up to bed, I helped Aunt Sarah lock up. She paused at the foot of the stairs, hand on the banister. You know, Tom, she said, when I came to this country 50 years ago, I never imagined this is how my story would go. Widowed, aching, alone, and then suddenly surrounded by love again. You gave me a second chapter one never expected. I hugged her carefully. She was stronger now, but I still remembered that day on the floor. You gave me one too, Auntie. Family isn't just what you're born with. Sometimes it's what you choose, and what chooses you. She patted my cheek, the way she had when I was small. Go home now. Get some rest. You're here tomorrow for Christmas lunch, remember? I laughed. Wouldn't miss it. As I stepped out into the snowy night, I looked back at the warm glow spilling from the windows of the little terraced house. It wasn't grand. It wasn't perfect. But it was full of life, full of love, full of second chances. And that, I realized, was the greatest help I could ever have given her.